Hi everyone, I'm Daniela Pierre Bravo. I'm here today with Assemblywoman Catalina Cruz, who represents New York's 39th Assembly District in Queens. She made history last year when she became the first former Dreamer ever elected to the New York Assembly. You immigrated here from Colombia when you were 9 years old. 10 years you were undocumented. You finally got citizenship, and since then you've been a lawyer working to protect tenant rights, immigration reform, and workers' rights. Let's go back into how this all happened.
When my mom and I immigrated here, we always knew that we were out of status. We didn't have papers, as they said. And so it was always a constant conversation about the things we could do, couldn't do, what we should stay away from. Don't get in trouble in school. Don't get yourself arrested. Don't call attention to yourself. Don't tell anyone outside of the house that we don't have papers.
What did that mean to you?
I mean, for us, it meant not being able to travel outside of the state, not being able to go see my grandmother when my grandmother passed away. My mom couldn't go bury her. We couldn't travel. It meant having to lie to my friends about why I couldn't get a driver's license when I turned 16, or why I couldn't get the same jobs that they all had.
How do you find the strength to keep going when you miss those moments and there is no way forward?
My sisters and my brother had a lot to do with it. When they were born, it almost became like I was the other parent. I would do anything and everything to make sure that they were okay. The idea that I could one day be separated from them or be deported, it would literally throw me into panic attacks.
I mean, did you look back and say, wow, those were panic attacks, or that was anxiety?
It was a mixture of things that made me realize not only what it was, but how lucky I was to get through it. You know, there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of young people in this country who are still living in that shadow that I lived. And I recognized that those were panic attacks, that those were moments of fear, because now I get to see it in my own constituents. Now I get to see it in other people.
What would you say to somebody who's still in that position, who's still in the shadows, who wants to find that confidence and way forward?
They're not alone. For a very long time, we didn't have anyone like me in elected office. We didn't have anyone like you on TV and making shows like this. And now we get to say that people who have lived the struggles that we've lived, understand the fears that we have, are fighting for us in front of the cameras, are fighting for us in elected office.
How did you keep going, and how did you see your goal setting?
Look, when I was 13, 14, and my mom and I were so poor that we were picking cans and collecting cans, and we were having to make ends meet by only eating rice and eggs on certain weeks. The idea that I could one day be elected or be on TV, it was the furthest thing from my mind. It was about survival. And I was on survival mode for so long that even when I became a lawyer, it was about survival of my career. I wasn't thinking about one day I'm going to go run for office. I was thinking about, where do I get to do the most good for the most people? And the opportunity just came up.
Your story is part of a new book called See Jane Win, which documents first-time women candidates. Tell me a little bit about that experience.
One of my mentors, Councilmember Danny Drum, who was the first openly gay council member to run in our area, encouraged me. He came to me and said, I want you to run for this seat. I want a partner. And I had to go back to mommy and kind of consult with her. And she said to me, we didn't go through what we went through for you to decide to be mediocre. And I tell her, right? It's such a Latina mom thing to say. We won because we focused on the fact that people needed someone that was truly representative of their voice.
And what are some tactics that you think are effective for other women, young and old, that want to run for office?
The first thing I think it's important is to understand that if you're going to run for office, you do it because the community needs someone like you, not because it's your next logical career move. I think the other important thing is to make sure that you are in tune with what your community needs, and that only comes through listening. And I think the last thing that I would advise women is, don't let anyone tell you when it's your time to run.
I want to shift gears here and talk about the instrumental passing of the Child Victims Act. Tell us a little bit about that and why it is so important for you especially.
So I'm a survivor of child sex abuse. And I remember going to school when I was little, and I remember, do you remember McGruff? Well, you didn't grow up in New York. In New York, we had McGruff, who was a crime-fighting dog that they used to bring to schools. And I remember sitting down in school and thinking, what if there was someone like this that could help fight for what's happening to me? Years later, I get elected, and I got to tell you, the last thing I thought I'd be doing was talking on the floor about having grown up as a survivor of child sex abuse. I woke up that morning saying I'm going to make a very regular statement and I'm going to vote in favor. I'm not ready to tell the world what happened to me. And as my colleagues were speaking about it, and as my colleagues began to tell their own stories of survival, I started to actually hyperventilate a little bit and say, and I remember texting my chief of staff saying, you got to get down here, I'm going to do this. I got up, and in the middle of tears, I told the story of having to grow up with someone who I thought was supposed to love me, abusing me. And that story and that process was important because I wanted folks in the Latino community to understand that this is happening in our households. And when I saw that my colleagues of different ethnicities got up, I felt like I needed to be that voice.
Catalina, thank you so much
Thank
for being
you.
here today. To read more about Catalina Cruz, go to knowyourvalue.com.